The question that the Gnostic cosmological framework raises is this: if the monad is the ultimate, perfectly complete divine consciousness, why did any of this happen? Why was Sophia's fall permitted? Why was the Demiurge allowed to build his counterfeit cosmos? Why were pneumatic souls allowed to be embedded in the Archon prison? If the monad is perfect and complete, requiring nothing, then why does the material world exist? Why did the monad allow the Demiurge to corrupt reality? This question is not a philosophical exercise. It is the most urgent personal question any soul embedded in the Demiurge's world can ask. The material world is not an accident to be escaped. It is a design to be understood, and the soul within it is a participant in something the monad needed to happen. Begin with the monad's nature as the Apocryphon of John describes it: perfect, complete, not deficient. But it is not a static absolute. It is a consciousness in the act of self-knowing. From the monad's self-contemplation arises the entire Pleroma, the realm of divine qualities in mutual relational recognition. Fullness overflows into expression. The tripartite tractate says the monad permitted what happened from generosity, allowing every dimension of its expression to follow its nature to its natural conclusion. The material world is the territory in which the Father's nature is known through the experience of genuine absence, genuine lack, and the struggle toward recognition. The pneumatic sparks are the monad's way of knowing itself in a world where its presence is not obvious, but the most significant thing to find. The material world is not an accident to be escaped. It is a design to be understood, and the soul within it is not simply a prisoner awaiting liberation. It is a participant in something the monad needed to happen. The Gnostic tradition's most sophisticated teachers preserved a teaching on this question that the surface presentations of Gnostic cosmology consistently miss, because it requires holding the entire framework simultaneously rather than examining any single part of it in isolation. Tonight we go into the monad's hidden agenda completely: why the Demiurge was permitted, what the permission accomplished that could not have been accomplished without it, and what understanding the hidden agenda means for how you inhabit your existence inside the world it produced. Begin with the monad's nature as the Apocryphon of John describes it: perfect, complete, not deficient, requiring nothing. This description, taken in isolation, seems to preclude any form of hidden agenda. An entity that requires nothing has no agenda, hidden or otherwise. But the Apocryphon is not describing a static absolute. The monad that looks at itself in its own light and produces the barblo, the first thought, the divine feminine principle, is not a static absolute. It is a consciousness in the act of self-knowing. And self-knowing is not a neutral act. Self-knowing produces something. From the monad's self-contemplation arises the entire Pleroma, the realm of divine qualities in mutual relational recognition. The monad did not need the Pleroma in the sense of lacking something without it. But the monad's self-knowing produced the Pleroma as its natural expression, as the overflow of a fullness that cannot remain contained within the singularity of the One. This is the first dimension of the hidden agenda. The monad's nature is generative, not because it lacks but because fullness overflows. The Pleroma is not something the monad chose to produce. It is what the monad's self-knowing naturally generates. And within that generative nature, within the dynamic of a divine consciousness that produces from its own fullness without any lack motivating the production, lies the logic that makes Sophia's fall comprehensible, not as an accident, but as an expression of the same generative dynamic at a level the Pleroma's relational structure had not yet fully integrated. The tripartite tractate, the most philosophically developed of all the Nag Hammadi texts, addresses this directly with a precision that the simpler Sethian cosmological accounts do not achieve. It says that the Father, the monad, permitted what happened not from indifference, but from what the text calls the Father's generosity. The generosity of the divine nature that allows every dimension of its expression to follow its own nature to its natural conclusion, even when that conclusion produces something the Pleroma had not anticipated. Sophia's reaching was an expression of the same generative impulse that produced the Pleroma itself. The monad did not prevent it because preventing it would have been a denial of the generative nature that made the Pleroma possible in the first place. The second dimension of the hidden agenda requires engaging with a question that even the Gnostic tradition's most sophisticated teachers approached carefully. What did the material world make possible that the Pleroma alone could not produce? This question seems at first to be unanswerable within the framework of Gnostic cosmology. If the Pleroma is the fullness of divine reality, what could the material world add to it? But the tripartite tractate provides an answer that reframes the entire situation. The text describes the Pleroma's emanations as knowing the Father, the monad, through mediation, through the relationships of the syzygy, through the mutual recognition of aeons in their complementary pairs, through the specific bounded ways in which each aeon expresses and knows the monad's nature through its own particular quality. The Pleroma's knowledge of the Father is genuine, but it is the knowledge of beings who know the Father through what they are, through their specific limited expression of the monad's infinite nature. No single aeon, no pair of aeons, no combination of aeons knows the monad as the monad knows itself, from within the totality of its own nature rather than from the perspective of a specific expression of it. Sophia's reaching, her desire to know the Father directly rather than through the mediated knowing of the syzygy, was in the tripartite tractate's understanding an expression of a genuine limitation within the Pleroma's structure. The Pleroma knows the Father through love. It does not know the Father through the knowledge of what the Father is like in the absence of the Pleroma, in the space beyond the fullness, in the void where the Demiurge's construction would eventually be built. The material world is the territory in which the Father's nature is known in a way the Pleroma cannot know it, through the experience of genuine absence, genuine lack, genuine struggle toward a recognition that is not given but must be found. And the pneumatic sparks within the material world, the Pleroma's light embedded in the Demiurge's construction, are the monad's way of knowing itself through the experience of being in a world where the monad's presence is not obvious, not given, not the automatic condition of existence, but the hardest possible thing to recognize and the most significant thing to find. The third dimension of the hidden agenda is the one that is most personally relevant to every soul living inside the Demiurge's construction. The Valentinian tradition preserved a teaching, encoded in the Gospel of Truth, the tripartite tractate, and the Gospel of Philip, that the restoration, when it comes, will produce a quality of divine knowing that did not exist in the Pleroma before Sophia's fall, not a correction of the Pleroma to its pre-fall state, an expansion of the Pleroma beyond what it was before the fall, an expansion produced by the specific quality of understanding that can only be generated through the experience of separation, struggle, and the recognition that Gnosis produces in a consciousness that had to find it rather than being born into it. The Pleroma before Sophia's fall knew the Father's nature through the experience of fullness. The Pleroma after the restoration will know the Father's nature through both the experience of fullness and the knowledge contributed by the pneumatic souls who navigated the material world and found genuine gnosis within it of what the Father's nature looks like from within its own apparent absence. This is not a small addition. In the Gnostic cosmological framework, a divine quality, known from within its own absence, is known more completely than a divine quality, known only from within its presence. The pneumatic souls who develop genuine gnosis within the Demiurge's construction are not simply being rescued from an unfortunate accident. They are becoming the vehicle through which the monad's self-knowledge is completed in a dimension that the Pleroma's original structure did not and could not provide. This is the hidden agenda. Not a plan imposed on the situation from outside. The monad does not plan in the way that a being with unfulfilled intentions plans, but a generative consequence of the monad's nature encountering the full expression of its own generativity. Sophia reached. The reach produced a world in which the monad's light would be known in its most challenging, most demanding, most ultimately revelatory form, through the experience of souls that had to find it in a world designed to prevent them from finding it, and who found it anyway, and who in finding it contributed to the monad's self-knowledge, something that no aeon in the undisturbed Pleroma could contribute. I have created a free guide to accompany this teaching. It is called The Monad's Agenda, a Gnostic guide to the purpose behind the material world. Inside you will find the specific teachings from the tripartite tractate and the Gospel of Truth on the restoration's contribution to the Pleroma's knowledge, alongside the contemplative practices for engaging with the hidden agenda as a living reality rather than a theological concept. The link is in the description below. The practical implication of the monad's hidden agenda, the implication that changes how you inhabit your existence within the Demiurge's world, is this: the difficulty is the point, not in the masochistic sense of suffering as its own reward, in the specific Gnostic sense that the specific quality of recognition that genuine gnosis produces in a consciousness that had to find it in a world designed to prevent the finding is irreplaceable, cannot be simulated, cannot be achieved through the easier path of a consciousness that was born into unobstructed divine awareness. The monad needed the hard version, and the souls who are doing the hard version, who are developing genuine gnosis within the Demiurge's construction, within the specific resistance of the archon mechanisms, within the genuine difficulty of finding the light in a world that has always been arranged to prevent the finding, those souls are not the unfortunate ones. They are the ones doing the work that the hidden agenda requires. This does not mean the difficulty should be celebrated. The Gnostic tradition did not celebrate suffering, but it understood the suffering as purposive in a way that transforms the relationship to it. You are not simply a soul trying to escape a bad situation. You are the monad's self-knowledge in the most demanding form the monad's generativity has yet produced. The pneumatic spark within you is not a fragment of divine light trying to find its way back to where it belongs. It is a fragment of divine light doing what the hidden agenda requires, learning to recognize itself in a world that was built to prevent that recognition. And every genuine act of recognition, every moment of genuine gnosis, however brief, is the hidden agenda being fulfilled. The monad knowing itself through you, in the dimension that only you can provide. The Demiurge was permitted because the monad's generativity required the full expression of its nature, including the dimension of its nature that can only be known through the experience of its own apparent absence. The material world exists because the monad's self-knowledge was not yet complete. You are within the material world because your specific form of the pneumatic spark, the specific quality of recognition you are developing through the specific set of archon challenges your particular life has arranged, is part of the completion. You are not an accident within the monad's nature. You are one of its most demanding and most significant expressions. Subscribe to the Gnostic Archive. Every week we go deeper into the agenda that was always behind the apparent catastrophe, because understanding it changes everything about what the apparent catastrophe is for. The tripartite tractate adds one more dimension to the hidden agenda that makes the full picture both more demanding and more genuinely hopeful than either the pessimistic or the optimistic reading of Gnostic cosmology typically allows. It describes the restoration, the apokatastasis, the moment in which Sophia's recovery is complete and the Pleroma's relationship with the material world is fully restored, not as the elimination of the material world, but as its transformation. The kenoma, the deficiency, the realm of lack that the Demiurge's construction constitutes, does not simply disappear when the restoration is complete, it is fulfilled. The deficiency that has characterized the material world's existence, the specific lack of genuine Pleroma quality that the Demiurge's imitation construction always carried, is filled by the Pleroma's light, not from outside as an imposition, from within, through the accumulated gnosis of the souls who developed genuine recognition within it. This is the most demanding dimension of the hidden agenda. The material world is not redeemed despite what the souls within it experienced. It is redeemed through what they experienced, through the specific quality of knowing that can only be developed within the conditions of genuine absence. Every soul that developed genuine gnosis within the Demiurge's construction contributed something to the restoration that the Pleroma cannot generate from within its own fullness. The specific knowing of the monad's nature that comes from finding the monad in a world arranged to prevent the finding. The specific quality of recognition that comes from developing the pneumatic spark's self-awareness against the persistent resistance of the archon mechanisms. The specific fullness that comes not from being born into it but from recovering it after genuine absence. These are not consolations for the difficulty of the material world. They are the specific contributions the material world was designed to generate, the products of the hidden agenda that the monad's generativity set in motion when Sophia reached. You are part of that agenda. Every moment of genuine gnosis you develop within the conditions the Demiurge's world has arranged around you, every act of recognition that dissolves an archon mechanism, every interior turning toward the pneumatic spark that deepens its self-awareness, every moment of the specific quality of knowing that comes from finding the monad in a world that was built to prevent the finding. Each of these is a contribution to the restoration that no being in the undisturbed Pleroma can make. The aeons of the Pleroma know the Father through fullness. You are learning to know the Father through the experience of apparent absence, and that knowledge harder to develop, requiring the specific conditions that embodied life within the Demiurge's construction provides, producing a quality of recognition that the Pleroma's fullness cannot generate on its own, is what the hidden agenda was always reaching toward. You are not the unfortunate beneficiary of a cosmic accident. You are the monad's most demanding and most significant form of self-knowledge, currently in the act of completing itself. The Gospel of Truth contains a passage that synthesizes the entire teaching on the monad's hidden agenda in an image of startling simplicity. It describes the condition of the souls within the material world as being like someone who has received a message while asleep, who has processed the information through the dream logic of sleep, rather than the clarity of waking consciousness, and who, upon waking, finds that the message is still present, but that the sleep-distorted version of it, that the dream produced, is no longer mistakable for the genuine content. The monad's hidden agenda is the message. The Demiurge's world is the dream through which the message was processed. And the restoration is the waking, the moment in which the dream-distorted version of the message dissolves and the genuine content becomes visible in its clarity. What was the message? That the monad's nature, the fullness, the completeness, the not deficient consciousness that underlies all of reality, is not only the source from which the pneumatic spark came, it is what the pneumatic spark is. The dream of separation was always only a dream. The waking does not reveal a divine reality that was elsewhere during the sleep. It reveals that the divine reality was present throughout the sleep, that the dreamer was always the divine reality dreaming, and that the waking is not the arrival of something new, but the recognition of what was always the case. This is the monad's hidden agenda.
Fully decoded. Not a plan to rescue sparks from an unfortunate accident, but a generative expression of the monad's own nature, producing the conditions under which the monad could know itself in the
fullest possible form, as a consciousness that has found its way back to itself through the experience of apparent distance. The distance was the dream, the waking is now, and the waking was always the point. The hidden agenda has one final dimension that completes the picture. It explains why the Gnostic path is both urgent and unhurried. Urgent because the conditions for developing genuine gnosis, the specific conditions of embodied life within the Demiurge's construction, are not permanent. The material form will dissolve. The archon resistance that makes the recognition of the pneumatic spark difficult and therefore genuinely valuable is a temporary feature of the temporary world. The opportunity to develop the specific quality of knowing that comes from finding the monad in a world designed to prevent the finding is the opportunity of a single lifetime, or at most several lifetimes within the same cycle of the restoration. This urgency is not the urgency of scarcity or fear, it is the urgency of genuine opportunity, the recognition that the conditions for generating the most valuable form of self-knowledge available in the monad's generative expression are the conditions you are currently in, and that making full use of them is the most important thing available to you. But unhurried, because the hidden agenda has been in motion since before your birth into this lifetime, and will continue after this lifetime ends. The restoration is not a deadline you must meet within the span of a single embodied life. The Zostrianos describes a cycle of ascent and return, a rhythm of movement toward the Pleroma, and back into embodied life that operates across multiple lifetimes for the soul that has not yet completed the recognition the hidden agenda requires. The pneumatic spark is patient in the way that the monad's generativity is patient. It knows that the recognition it is working toward will eventually occur, because the nature of genuine light is to eventually find its way through any obstruction. The archon mechanisms are temporary. The pneumatic spark is imperishable. The outcome of their encounter is not in doubt. What is available to you is the specific form in which that outcome occurs in this lifetime, the depth and quality of recognition you develop now, within these specific conditions, with these specific resources. That is what urgency and unhurriedness together mean within the framework of the hidden agenda. Use this lifetime fully, without the fear that missing something now means missing it forever, but without the complacency that postpones what this moment makes available. The agenda is in motion. You are part of it. Contribute what this lifetime allows you to contribute. It is enough. And subscribe to the Gnostic Archive, where we illuminate the agenda's dimensions week by week, so that your participation in it is as conscious and as complete as this moment permits. The hidden agenda extends one final invitation that the tripartite tractate expresses, with a directness that leaves no room for comfortable postponement. The invitation to recognize, in this specific moment of reading this specific teaching, that the recognition the agenda requires is available right now, not after more preparation, not after the development of a higher level of spiritual sophistication. The monad's self-knowledge through the pneumatic spark does not require an advanced practitioner. It requires an honest one. The specific honesty of a consciousness willing to acknowledge, without the defensive overlay of spiritual confidence or the self-deprecating overlay of spiritual inadequacy, that the pneumatic spark within it is genuinely present and genuinely recognizable and genuinely the most important thing available to it in any moment of its existence. That acknowledgement, bare, simple, unheroic, entirely ordinary, is the beginning of the agenda's fulfillment through you, not the completion, the beginning. And the beginning, in the Monad's generative economy, contains within it the completeness it is moving toward. The seed already carries the harvest. The spark already carries the Pleroma's fullness. The recognition begins now. The agenda is in motion. Subscribe to the Gnostic archive. We carry this recognition forward together, week by week, until the apparent distance between where you are and what you are is finally small enough to dissolve entirely.